You just checked your bank account and felt that familiar sinking feeling. Not because you're broke, not exactly, but because somehow, even after the raise, even after the better apartment, even after the car that finally made you feel like you were catching up, it still doesn't feel like enough. And that's the part you don't say out loud. Because on paper, your life looks better than it used to. So why does it still feel like you can't breathe? It starts small. It always starts small. The streaming service you meant to cancel 2 months ago. The upgraded phone plan because the old one felt embarrassing. The grocery bill that somehow doubled even though you swear you bought the same things. The coffee that became a routine. The dinners that became just this once. The furniture you financed because you were tired of feeling behind. The clothes you bought because you were finally becoming the kind of person who should look put together. And none of it feels reckless. That's what makes this so dangerous. You're not out here making one huge catastrophic mistake. You're making 20 tiny reasonable ones. And each one comes wrapped in a story. You work hard. You deserve this. You'll save more next month. Once things settle down, you'll get serious. After this trip. After the holidays. After the promotion. After the move. After life stops happening. 3 years go by like that. 3 years of saying, next month. 3 years of opening the retirement calculator, staring at the number, and quietly closing the tab because you don't have the emotional bandwidth for that kind of honesty at 9:30 on a Tuesday. 3 years of telling yourself you can't afford to invest, when what you really mean is you built a life that spends your money before you get to decide what matters. You feel it in strange moments. When a friend casually mentions maxing out their 401k and you laugh like you're both on the same page. When your card gets declined for something small and harmless, and suddenly the whole month feels like an accusation. When you say, I'm being good, because you skipped takeout once, even though the real damage isn't in one meal, it's in the pattern. It's always been in the pattern. And then comes the quiet desperation part. The part where you realize you're earning more than you ever thought you would, but your monthly obligations have grown right alongside your income, like they were waiting for you. The nicer place costs more. The newer car costs more. The better lifestyle has hidden maintenance fees attached to every corner of it. More to insure, more to replace, more to justify, more to keep up. And what nobody tells you is how quickly comfort becomes necessity. That gym membership you barely use doesn't feel optional anymore because canceling it feels like becoming a worse version of yourself. The car payment doesn't feel like a choice anymore because now your identity is wrapped around what you drive. The expensive neighborhood doesn't feel like a preference. It feels like proof you made it. So every bill stops being a bill and starts becoming part of your self-image. Now you're not just paying for things. You're paying to remain the person those things allow you to pretend you are. That's heavier. Because a canceled subscription is easy, a threatened identity is not. So you keep going. You keep telling yourself it's temporary. That once you make a little more, everything will click. That the next raise will fix the stress this raise didn't. That someday you'll finally arrive at the number where money stops feeling tight. But there's something darker underneath this. Because the trap was never about the price tags. It was about the upgrades you didn't notice were permanent. The ones that slipped into your life disguised as rewards. Better mattress, better neighborhood, better restaurants, better vacations, better skincare, better groceries. Better everything. And every better came with a monthly invoice attached to it. Nobody sat you down and explained that lifestyle inflation doesn't arrive like a villain. It arrives like relief. It feels like exhaling. You are too busy surviving to see the pattern. Too busy trying to build a life that didn't feel like struggle. Too busy healing the part of you that was tired of saying no. So, of course you said yes when life finally gave you options. Of course you upgraded. Of course you wanted your surroundings to match how hard you'd worked. That's human. And the game changed while you were celebrating. Because once your expenses rise to meet your income, the raise that was supposed to buy you freedom ends up buying you a nicer cage. Same job, same boss, same dependents, just with better lighting, a newer couch, and a payment plan. You weren't irresponsible. You were misled. The system loves this version of you, the version that earns more and immediately absorbs it into a more expensive normal. The version that believes adulthood means constant upgrading. The version that confuses visible progress with actual stability. Because visible progress is profitable. Stability isn't. Think about how every industry speaks to you, not in terms of ownership, in terms of affordability. Not, should you buy this, but can you fit this into a monthly payment? Not, what does this cost over 10 years, but what's the minimum due today? The entire game is built around keeping your attention on the monthly hit, because if you ever zoomed out far enough to see the lifetime cost, you'd stop playing. And this is where everything you thought you knew breaks. Because here's what nobody tells you about money. The goal was never to make enough to afford a luxurious life. The goal was to need so little of your income that you could finally start buying your time back. That's different. That changes everything. Because if your lifestyle expands every time your paycheck does, then making more money doesn't solve the problem, it deepens it. You become more dependent on high income to support high expenses, which means you can't leave, can't slow down, can't take risks, can't breathe. You look wealthier, but your freedom is shrinking. The wealthy don't think about money the way you were taught. Most people think money is for consumption, a tool for upgrading comfort, image, convenience, something you exchange for a better life right now. And sometimes it is. But the people who actually build lasting options use money differently. They use it to reduce future dependence. They buy distance between themselves and panic. They buy the ability to say no. They buy time. They buy choice. That's why someone making $80,000 and keeping a massive gap between income and spending can be in a stronger position than someone making $200,000 who needs every dollar just to maintain the machine they built around themselves. There was a guy like that. Made over $200,000 a year by his mid-30s. Impressive job title, luxury apartment, leased SUV, designer everything. Weekend trips, reservation-only dinners, a watch that quietly announced his status before he opened his mouth. From the outside, he looked like he had won. Then the company restructured. 3 months later, he was selling furniture online and negotiating with credit card companies in his kitchen at midnight. Not because he was stupid, not because he didn't make enough. Because he had built a life that required constant performance. The income looked big. The margin was tiny. And when the income stopped, the truth showed up all at once. This is why millionaires often do the opposite of what you'd expect. Not always flashy, not always upgraded, sometimes almost boring. Because the point isn't to look like you're winning. The point is to stop being fragile. And what happens next is the part most people miss. Money is not a math problem first. It's an identity problem. Most budgets fail, not because the numbers are wrong, but because the life underneath those numbers never changed. You can make a spreadsheet, say whatever you want, save more, spend less, cut subscriptions, cook at home. But if a part of you still believes money is how you soothe stress, prove worth, reward effort, signal success, or avoid feeling left behind, then the budget never stood a chance. You're not bad with money. You're just good at the wrong game. You got really good at earning, really good at coping, really good at making expensive things feel deserved, really good at confusing relief with progress. But wealth has very little to do with how intensely you want a better life. It has everything to do with whether you can resist the urge to spend your future in exchange for emotional comfort today. And that sounds harsh until you see it clearly. Because once you do, you stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what role am I playing in keeping this pattern alive? That's where power comes back. Because the first principle is this: money is a test of self-trust, not willpower. Most people think financial discipline is about being strict, white-knuckling every purchase, denying every craving, acting like the strongest person is the one who can say no forever. But that's not how this works. Willpower runs out, stress wins, fatigue wins, Friday night wins. Self-trust is different. Self-trust is when you know the future version of you is real enough that today's version stops stealing from them. When you trust yourself, you don't need the constant reward. You don't need to turn every hard week into a shopping excuse. You don't need to say, "I've earned this," every time you want relief. Because you begin to believe that protecting your tomorrow is also a form of care. Maybe the highest form. Picture two people with the exact same paycheck. One spends whatever is left after life happens. The other decides in advance what future matters more than current impulse. Same income, different relationship with self. One is negotiating with feelings every week. The other already made the decision upstream. That's not budgeting. That's identity. And this is where it gets interesting. The second principle is that every dollar is a worker, and most people send them to war without orders. A dollar doesn't care what you meant to do. It only does what you direct it to do. If you don't assign it a job, someone else will. The landlord, the lender, the algorithm. The ad you saw after a stressful day. The sale ending at midnight. The monthly subscription that counts on your forgetfulness. The upgrade prompt. The convenience fee. The tiny leak that becomes a flood because nobody was watching. Most people treat extra money like breathing room. That's why it disappears. They don't direct it. They absorb it. A tax refund becomes a trip. A bonus becomes furniture. A raise becomes a lease agreement. Every new dollar arrives with potential, and then quietly gets recruited into maintaining the same life that already had them exhausted. The people who win do something stranger. They act like every dollar has to justify its existence. They ask where this money goes if the goal is not just to feel better this weekend, but to be harder to control 5 years from now. They turn income into insulation. That could mean one person uses a $400 monthly raise to finance a nicer car, and another sends that same $400 into investments for 10 years. One gets new leather seats. The other gets a growing pile of evidence that work is becoming optional. Same $400. Different future. The third principle is that wealth is built in the gap between what you could spend and what you choose not to. This is the part nobody wants to hear. Because it sounds too simple, too unglamorous, too much like sacrifice. But almost every form of real stability is hiding inside that gap. Not your income, the gap. Not your job title, the gap. Not your aspirations, the gap between your desires and your decisions. You can make $50,000 and build one. You can make $300,000 and destroy one. That gap is where options come from. It's where stress starts to lose its grip. It's where the emergency fund becomes more than a number and starts becoming a personality shift. Because when you live below your means long enough, something weird happens. You stop needing the world to validate you every time you open your wallet. You become less reactive, less impressible, harder to manipulate. There was a couple who retired in their early 40s after doing something most people would call extreme. But the truth is, it was just one rule taken seriously. Every increase in income did not automatically earn an increase in lifestyle. They kept their apartment when friends upgraded, drove the paid-off car when everyone else financed new ones, banked raises, ignored status games. From the outside, it probably looked like they were missing out. Then one day, work became optional. That's the thing about restraint. It looks like deprivation right up until it looks like power. And what happens next is the part most people never connect. The fourth principle is that your financial future is being decided by your 11 p.m. decisions. Not the big annual goals, not the dramatic January promises, the late-night taps, the tired version of you, the emotionally worn-down version, the version that says, "I need something," because that version is often the real CFO of your life. You can talk about long-term investing all day, but if every night ends with emotional spending, convenience spending, avoidance spending, or aspirational spending, then your future is getting quietly sold off in pieces no spreadsheet can fully capture. The 11 p.m. version of you doesn't want a budget. It wants relief. It wants softness. It wants dopamine. It wants to not think. And if you don't understand that, you'll keep building plans that fail under perfectly predictable conditions. That's why the real work is not just financial. It's emotional. The people who build money well are often the people who stop outsourcing comfort to consumption. They find other ways to regulate, other ways to feel okay, other ways to be enough without proving it through purchases. There was an inheritance once, not huge, but enough to change a life if handled carefully. Gone in 18 months. Better apartment, better car. Debts paid off, then slowly replaced. Gifts, upgrades, conveniences. A kind of spending that felt justified because it came after years of not having much. And then it was gone. Not in one stupid decision, in 100 understandable ones. That's how this works. Not with explosions, with erosion. You know this. That's why this hits. Because some part of you already feels the trap. You feel it every time a raise brings relief for about 6 weeks before becoming normal. Every time a purchase solves a feeling for 3 days and creates a bill for 3 years. Every time you realize the life you built requires more maintenance than joy. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Your lifestyle is someone else's marketing budget working. Every urge to upgrade, every sense that your current life is almost enough, but not quite. Every subtle shame around not having the nicer version, the newer version, the premium version. None of that happened by accident. Entire industries are built on making your present life feel insufficient, Because if you ever felt deeply okay with enough, huge parts of the economy would collapse. And here's another one. You are not one emergency away because life is cruel. You are one emergency away because fragility was normalized, because keeping up replaced building margin, because looking stable took priority over being stable, because 1,000 tiny comforts quietly outranked one boring cash buffer that would have changed everything when life got real. That's not judgment, that's leverage. Because what created the problem can be uncreated. And one more. Every person you envy financially made a trade you didn't see. They looked boring when everyone else looked exciting. They delayed things that were easy to justify. They tolerated being misunderstood. They kept the old car, stayed in the smaller place, ignored the social pressure. Or they learned the hard way after pain forced the lesson. Either way, the bill gets paid. Up front or later. 5 years from now, you will either be unbelievably grateful you broke this pattern or quietly exhausted that you didn't. 10 years from now, the cost becomes harder to hide. 20 years from now, it becomes your story. And no, this is not about becoming a joyless robot. It's not about never enjoying your money. It's about knowing the difference between a life that serves you and a lifestyle that owns you. It's about being honest about what things cost beyond the receipt, not just dollars. Dependence, stress, years, choices, energy. Because every monthly payment is a claim on your future labor. Every upgrade that becomes permanent has to be fed. Every bill is asking for a piece of your life. So the real question was never, can you afford it? The real question is, how much of your life will this require? That dinner, that car, that move, that house, that image, that version of you. How much of your life? If you keep going the way you are, the path is not mysterious. You'll earn more, spend more, normalize more, need more. And keep telling yourself freedom is coming later, as long as later never becomes now. You'll build a life that looks increasingly complete from the outside and feels increasingly non-negotiable from the inside. Work won't become optional. It will become more necessary than ever. Forever decorated. Forever justified. Forever expensive. The other path is less comfortable at first. It means pulling your identity out of your spending, letting some upgrades pass, looking simpler than you could look, feeling the friction of not immediately rewarding yourself, sitting with the truth of what you've been avoiding, building margin so slowly it almost feels invisible, choosing stability over performance, quiet over applause, enough over more. It doesn't feel glamorous. At first, it feels like loss. Then it starts to feel like control. Then it starts to feel like peace. And eventually, if you stay with it long enough, it starts to feel like your life belongs to you again. So what do you actually want? Not what looks good. Not what sounds successful. Not what everyone around you has normalized. What do you want when you strip away the performance and the pressure and the stories? How much of your life are you willing to trade for upgrades you stopped enjoying months ago? What would happen if you stopped lying to yourself about money? The question isn't if you can change. It's if you will.